The South African government, led by the President of the Republic, have been in the forefront in sending envoys to different countries to brief them about the situation at home. Because what was projected, and which is what is out there, and it doesn't start now, were even condemned by the United Nations when it was projected that people have been beaten up in South Africa and that they have been chased away and all of that, and some people died. Remember, at some point you guys reported that a Mozambican national died somewhere in the Eastern Cape or Western Cape, somewhere there. And then that in South Africa we are killing foreigners of African descent, and there's war. And these people who are marching, when they started, that's how they caught the attention, mobilizing and beating up people. It changed over time when generally churches and broader civil society condemned this vigilantism. And the language and the approach these marchers were taking then began to change. Now, there's no one in a state like ours, where the rule of law runs supreme, can actually take the law into their own hands and do what was projected to be coming. So the 30th of June was projected as a cleansing of Africans in our country by all means necessary, including violence, including killing. We started seeing people marching with knobkiris and all of that. And then we as the ANC have been very consistent. We say that this thing that is being done by these people, it must not be celebrated. It must be condemned and discouraged. And the law must intervene. Because we knew that from the days of apartheid, this thing of ethnic wars and tribal wars, what they did in the mines, when our people were made to speak Fanagaloko, Sutus fighting with the Xhosas, and all of that, and when people came to Johannesburg to work in the mines, and all of that, because those among them were captured for cheap labor, and majority of our people were basically isolated from these mines, and foreigners were being protected and being prepared and armed to attack some of the South Africans in these mines. It has evolved over time. And South Africa is not only a signatory, but we have fought a brutal system of apartheid and defeated it, which is a system of hatred and all of that. And then we kept on cautioning, don't call our African brothers amakwirikwiri. Yumasikela speaks to us from the grave. Yekela ukubiza abanye abantu ngakuthi ngamakirimani nabo ngabantu. Nothing wrong raising your ire about the fact that illegal immigration have taken over Hillbrow. Majority of the people who are there and the buildings around us here and all of that in Johannesburg belong to some people we don't know. And majority of people who occupy those buildings are undocumented. The state must intervene and clean out. And that is what has been undertaken by an interministerial committee to deal with these particular issues. So we have never been a nation that will embrace things like xenophobia, because we come from a history of racism. Xenophobia is a form of hatred, against another human being. Singabantu bobuntu, which is the truth. What a single provocateur does in the streets of Johannesburg does not represent millions of South Africans in our country. By beating up people, chasing people, becoming an agent provocateur, and doing all sorts of things. And these are the things that we have condemned. And we are very clear that there are other countries in the African continent who were quick to rush that this deserves attention and South Africa must be isolated and all of that. Businesses of South Africa and the South Africans working in the African continent. There are people who are naive who think that South Africa does not do business with the rest of the continent, and there are no South Africans who are working in the African continent. That's not naivety. That's absolute, disaster for any individual, because you have closed yourself from the rest of the continent by thinking that this country of ours can exist outside Africa when we are in Africa ourselves. So the government of South Africa have undertaken a mission to brief different countries, and others we know have gone as far as targeting Al-Amin summit of the African Union to make a case against South Africa. And that is why, as the ANC, we have worked on this immigration compact that seeks to intervene in law, but at the same time to define this immigration matter which we place before you, and we say it requires our discussion and enrichment as to what then makes this. It's not only a South African phenomenon, it's global, it's African. People come here to South Africa for a reason, in their numbers, because they run away from their countries. Others genuinely from political conflict, which they are covered by Geneva Convention in terms of how you deal with refugees and all of that. But others are coming here because they are looking for greener pastures. And unfortunately, they are doing that in an unlawful manner because of our porous borders. They come through and then they settle in our country. And whenever they do things, including criminality, we can't find them in the system. Now, you cannot go and settle in another country, create a drug den, and sell drugs and cocaine, and at the same time the neighborhood just watches on. Some point people are going to explode against that. Unfortunately, some of the illegal immigrants in South Africa, this is what they do. And we're not talking theory here, because we have dealt with these cases, and that is why we say dismantle these drug cartels and drug dens in our communities and all of that. And those who are found to be not properly documented must then be properly, in a dignified manner, channeled to go back home. And that is what has happened. More than 70,000 of undocumented illegal immigrants have been taken to their different countries. So these issues need to be clarified, even with Nigeria, a biggest economy in the African continent. So special envoys have been doing that particular work, including Minister Lamula, which I saw in the media that earlier on it was reported that they were chased because we live in the era of disinformation. By that time, I knew there is no such a thing, because Lamula had gone to Nigeria and probably came back last night on the same day, in the morning, early hours of the morning, and came back late. But it was reported in social media that they've been chased away, which was not correct. And our Minister of Terco